Hey everyone, before we start this podcast, this wonderful podcast with our guest Ames on Close Encounters, I wanted to jump in here and give some context on this episode. We actually recorded this a while back before we even announced that we're going to be taking a hiatus from reactions. So that's why throughout this podcast, you'll hear us making references to the channel. And also, you might get some context as to why we felt the way we did and what led us to taking a break from the reactions. We kind of voice some frustrations that we have. You know, we get deep and personal like we do with this podcast on every episode. But I just thought it was important to provide you guys with some context. And now to the episode. What we have here is a failure to communicate. These famous words spoken by the prison warden in Cool Hand Luke still rings true today. Language is the most powerful tools humans have, but we still can't understand each other. If the human race is stuck in one long game of telephone, maybe all it would take to course correct is an alien ship, an obsession for the extraordinary, and 5 simple tones. This is Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Wow, I feel like you just delivered that to the nation.
I know, I literally have a tear in my eye.
Hello, America. Welcome to Movies That Changed Us. I'm Altaf.
And I'm Chris.
And if you're listening to us on Spotify, know that you can also watch us on YouTube at Movies That Changed Us, because today we have a very exciting guest, Ames from Hold Down A.
Hi.
Oh, and I forgot to say the thing that I always say, which is today we're going to explore how Close Encounters of the Third Kind changed Ames from Hold Down A.
Yes.
That was a bit of a messy intro, but thank you for joining the show.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for having me. It's an honor.
Oh, come on.
It is.
So before we get to the movie, I just want to say a fun story. We came across your channel about, like, Chris, would it be like about 4 or 5 months ago?
Came across your channel? No, like a year ago.
Has it been a year?
Yeah.
What was the video? Because you were the one that shared the channel with me. What was the video that you came across?
It was a Saving Private Ryan reaction.
Right.
Oh.
And I remember, like, Chris very early on was telling me, I was like, oh man, she's great. She's going to blow past us. It's like, she's really good. And and I think the thing that Chris specifically told me was that, like, she feels like us and how we watch movies. And
I like how, like, just like, oh, that's how good she is. She feels like us.
in a sense of just like we connect with the way, not
Totally.
just like, oh, we have this high bar.
Yeah,
I'm just saying,
I
like,
totally get that. Yeah.
you know, like, when you find like a friend or something where you're just like, oh, you like, we're on the same wavelength.
Same energy is exchanged, you know.
And yeah, so Chris was very complimentary. I watched your channel, enjoyed it just as much. And then when we started having guests on this podcast, we both were like, okay, let's try to find a way to reach out to her. You are very much like off the grid outside the channel, so it was a bit difficult. And then you reached out to us, so much so that I was like, this has to be a fake account. Like, but we're so glad to have you on, and I want to ask you to open up the show. We asked you what movie to pick. You picked this one. Why did you pick Close Encounters of the Third Kind?
Thanks you guys so much for saying all that, because I felt the same way about your guys' channel, and just, you guys are cool dudes, nice dudes that I'd like to hang out with.
Oh, hell yeah.
So this was a very hard task. I felt like I took it very seriously and it was really challenging, but I actually just watched this movie a couple weeks ago, and I was particularly in a very vulnerable space. I had some life stuff happen within like my career with film stuff and wanting to be an actor and stuff. And I think that I was in the right moment, in the right time to appreciate this film for exactly what it was. And it really, really hit me on a lot of different emotional levels that we'll obviously get into. But it was really a really life-changing experience for me, which sounds so deep, but
no, but I
trust me,
think
yeah.
so. I think what's fascinating about just like the experience of watching a movie that really affects you is that, so it's what you said. Sometimes, like, all it really takes is like the right place and the right time. Because maybe if you watched Close Encounters like 4 months ago, you would have been like, that's like an impressive Spielberg movie. But I think I got excited when you picked this one, knowing that you had seen it recently, because I'm like, okay, there is sometimes you just have that feeling. You're like, okay, well, that just kind of that I'm always going to remember that movie for the rest of my life, and that's always exciting when you experience that for the first time.
Yeah, 100%. When you feel kind of heard or spoken to in a unique way.
I had seen this movie before. Spielberg is my favorite filmmaker of all time.
When did you first watch it again? I forget.
I saw it like back in like high school.
Okay, so have you rewatched it multiple times
Yes,
since?
I have.
Got it.
Yeah. Spielberg is my favorite filmmaker of all time. It is not the coolest thing to say just because it's like no shit, but like, but I think he's just been an inspiration my whole life, really. There is E.T. was the movie I watched when I was sick constantly. If that was like my go-to sick movie. Jurassic Park was one of those early movies my dad showed me that I can confidently say changed my life. And Close Encounters was the one when I saw it in high school. It does kind of feel like you're witnessing something. It's way more psychological than any of Spielberg's other movies. And in terms of like the genre pieces that he's done, the sci-fi, that kind of, it's so much more like about how we would feel experiencing something like this.
Yeah, the impact that it has on your brain, essentially.
And there's so much I want to dive deep into of like why it means so much to me. And Ames, we have so much to ask you of why it meant so much to you when you watched it a few weeks back. But something to point out is that this was Chris's first time watching this.
Yay.
Yeah.
I think for Ames and I, we're both like holding our breaths being like, what did you think?
Totally.
Well, I know. I remember it goes as far back, like probably a reaction we did over a year ago. At one point, there was some reference to Close Encounters, and you said during the reaction, like, you looked at the camera and you're like, guys, tell Chris to watch Close Encounters. And we did get comments. We did actually get comments that were like, Chris, you need to watch Close Encounters. Yeah. It's just, I never deliberately avoided this movie. It's not a movie that like was like, I'm not going to watch that. It just never really crossed my radar. I've heard of it for a while, but I didn't even know that it was Spielberg until much later. Like it just never was mentioned to me. It took me a while to even learn that. Yeah.
Okay. So
I had no idea this was Spielberg either. Like I think I heard of him directing this a couple years back, and I was like, I need to watch this movie. I never got around to it, and I was like, what? Like Steven Spielberg? Yeah, I had no idea.
Well, I think that's what's fascinating. That's why I was excited to do this movie on this podcast is that like this is somehow become, I mean, this was a huge hit. Obviously, this movie came out right after Jaws. So it wasn't like this movie was this like hidden gem. But it kind of has become underrated in a weird way after all these years.
It kind of got overshadowed by his other insanely big hits.
Because he did this movie.
Yeah, I think also maybe Star Wars at the time.
Yeah.
Well, that's a great point because like Star Wars came like a couple years after this.
No, was it Star Years the same year, 1977.
Yeah, same year.
Whoa.
Yeah, I remember that was like a thing, didn't they? Yeah.
Well, anyway, but like the thing was that like I feel like E.T. has become the alien movie that we were like a lot of people are just like Spielberg and UFOs and aliens. They think of E.T. immediately. Close Encounters is like, it's kind of a weird outlier. I look at it in the same way, not in terms of quality, but I look at it in the same way in terms of with Temple of Doom, just because it has that same like dark energy behind it that I feel like Spielberg never really taps into that often with his big genre pieces. Like it's just very interesting. But overall, like you go into this movie, you know it's Spielberg now. What did you know about it going in? Like what did you hear about it? What was the
Mostly nothing. The only thing I've seen imagery of the spaceships. I've heard the dun 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 that music before. I thought that was like an actual like just a John Williams score or something like that. I didn't realize that would actually be like a part of the movie, if that makes sense.
I mean, he did compose it with
I'm just saying though, I didn't realize that would literally be a sound included in the storyline, like affecting things. I thought it was just a score. And but yeah, as soon as the movie started, I saw Richard Dreyfuss's name. I was like, oh, hey, he's in this. Oh, hey, he's in it. As the movie was going, I didn't know like anything else. I knew it had something to do with aliens, and that's really it.
Yeah. So what did you think?
So yeah, with that being said, I really, really liked it. Yay. I really did, and I think it's weird because I also had to go in not expecting a Spielberg movie because, like you said, it's very different from what he does. Like you can totally feel his fingerprints on it, like the way he shoots the family drama. He does a lot of the typical, Spielbergisms that he likes to shoot with. But in terms of like themes, it feels like a true sci-fi movie. in the sense of like we were talking about. It's like almost like him dipping his toes very gently into Lovecraftian themes a little bit, of like the way cosmic beings can have an effect on your psyche and drive you insane a little bit because you don't understand what it means or if it amounts to anything. And obviously it ends up manifesting into this weird storyline about a mountain, that he ends up, we'll get into it, but it was really fascinating to me. And it's something about it as the days passed, it did get, and like, it got a little in my bones as it kept going, as I thought about it more. So
and well, you're right though. Sorry to interrupt, but I do think E.T. overshadows this one. And I think also it's potentially the pacing of it and how much it does get into your psyche. I don't know if it's one that people necessarily could hook into as much, especially in 1977.
Sure.
So yeah, maybe it has to do with like people just choose his other ones instead of this one.
I mean, I love Close Encounters. I have seen it plenty of times. I rewatched some scenes on YouTube, but at the same time, it's like, it doesn't have that same rewatchable quality the way E.T. does, just because it is a movie that like,
it's not a cozy movie like E.T.
You have to sit, you have to give it time. You have to sit with it. You know what I mean? But that's why I appreciate it. But this is a great like transition though, because you were talking about the Lovecraftian nature of it, of like the cosmic nature of it, what you see and what you're believing. Okay, first question to ask like the table and Ames is, do you like what are your thoughts on aliens and UFOs? Do you believe in that stuff, or do you even like exploring that stuff on your own?
Yes. Like a hard yes.
Hell yeah.
I have, thought about aliens like ever since I was a young kid. My brother and I used to talk about it. I used to look at the sky all the time. I used to like wish upon a star like out my window every night. And I definitely talk about aliens like every day in my personal life. There's a good documentary called like The Phenomenon that like, it's actually the only thing that truly actually terrifies me. Like my original love of film is horror, but my true personality is sci-fi. But I think it's possible. I have like a couple theories, but I find it's intriguing. It's a very interesting thought that we may not be alone.
Was it since you were like a little kid that you were thinking about that stuff?
Yeah, probably like 8 years old.
And what is it about it that like scares you?
It's like it's not like, obviously there's like alien movies. They come and they, want to take over the world. That's scary. I think it's like the scariness of like what it could mean and like the enlightenment and like maybe our brains aren't able to comprehend that evolution. I don't know if that's the right word, but you know what I mean? Like, it's kind of like this, I don't know. It's just kind of like outside of us that maybe we can't comprehend yet. And yeah. And but I'm not actually scared of them. Like watching this movie, obviously it's peaceful, right? It's quite touching, but yeah. So that's kind of how I feel about aliens.
Yeah, I mean, I get the same way. Like, I think, I think what you're essentially getting at is like just the existence of aliens is scary. Just the idea of them existing, because like you said, for the way we interpret the world around us, it will just completely change, And I've always like, we touched on this because we reviewed Nope recently, which you haven't seen it yet, right?
I haven't seen it.
Okay, so we won't give anything away. So we touched on some of this for listeners who've heard our Nope episode, but I've always been one to like, I'm not going to outright deny aliens exist, but I'm not going to really like, deliberately believe in them unless something is there. Because I do think that if there were aliens, at least in my opinion, I don't think they would obey the same laws of physics that we do. I don't think it'll be like a spaceship and they'll have hind legs and eyes right here. You know what I'm saying? If they do exist, it'll be a whole different set of rules they'll play by,
Yeah, it's interesting. Even though the aliens in Close Encounters are like very classical and humanoid, even in a way, they the way they communicate feels truly out of this world. Where it is, I think the most fascinating part about this movie is that what I was mentioning in my synopsis, like language is both a tool, but it's a source of destruction. It's a source of confusion for humans. And the only way all these humans are able to get together and communicate with this other being is through music.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wanted to start here. It's funny. The first time I watched this movie, I didn't really think about aliens that much. like when I came out of it. I think what really affected me was Richard Dreyfuss' character and that obsession that he has.
Yeah, yeah.
And reading Spielberg interviews, he talks a lot about how this movie for him is many things, and one of them being just like the obsessive nature of wanting to express yourself. Like when you have something in your mind and you need to put it out there, it is this source of like, whatever that needs to happen will happen, but I need to get this out of my head and onto screen, onto the stage, onto the piece of paper, wherever it is. And that can come at the cost of people around you, you losing the people around you, because they might not understand what you're going through.
Yeah.
So I wanted to Ames, I wanted to ask you, because obviously this movie affected you in a very deep way for having just recently seen it. What was like, do you have a specific memory in your life in general where you're like, nobody fucking gets it?
That's a awesome question, and I'm gonna have to like dig deep here. I feel like maybe I'm just like a little bit weird, and so it could be a few things, but nothing really off the top of my mind. I think maybe
Sure.
movies have given me ideas. Like growing up, I like loved The Craft, so like I just
okay.
wanted to do like seances, and like friends that I would have over would like think I was weird, but I was like, this is cool.
Yeah.
So like, I don't know, but that's kind of the only thing that's coming up in me right now, but it's
Sure,
a good
yeah.
question.
I think for me, I think maybe something we could all connect on. Just I think this is what I was at least going for is like we all like do this job, right? Like we all like do YouTube. And now I feel like YouTube is a much more common thing that everyone understands. But at least for Chris and I think what we relate on a lot is that for both of us at a very young age, we were kids with cameras running around. And you always had to get your group of people to like get on that wavelength with you to like make stuff with you. And at least for me, I remember that like inflection point where I was like, all my friends are excited about shooting this thing with me, but I seem to be the only one that gives so much of a shit about it that it needs to get done.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
I remember, like, when I was a younger kid, I was like, me and my friends would do, like, these short films together or whatever. And there would always be a point where your friends are kind of just sick of it. They're just like, all right, well, I don't want to do it today. I'm like, what do you mean? We have to get this shot. They're like, and they didn't say this, but they were in that mindset of like, dude, we're 15. Like, it's fine. And and I think that was like an early moment in my life that's kind of informed every decision I've made, informed me moving to LA. It's that feeling of like, no one fucking understands this. Yeah. And I didn't grow up in California. I didn't grow up close to the industry. I grew up in Knoxville, Tennessee. My parents are both Indian. They're people who work like hardworking jobs with the business that they ran. You know, they work with their hands. They like they're not involved in the arts. Yeah. And so there were moments where I felt like Richard Dreyfuss throwing those plants in the house. I'm like, come on. Like,
I
totally get out of my way. Let me do this thing.
I know. I actually resonate with that because my family immigrated here. So I'm like first generation in Canada. And I want, ever since I watched Michelle Pfeiffer in Batman Returns, I wanted to be an actor. And my parents, they didn't get it. And I was obsessed. And I always had dreams of moving to Vancouver because it's more of a film city. And I was like, as soon as I graduate high school, I'm literally leaving. And so that's probably something I connect with you. Because all I do is obsess with like, I want to make movies. How do I make movies? And then I'm doing this YouTube thing. But yeah, but maybe my parents never understood me, or they're like, you need a real job.
It's also this level of insanity, not to like romanticize it, but if you really zoom back and being like, why would you even want to be a part of this business? Yeah. It feels like every year, everyone's constantly talking about how the business is dying. Every year it's like, it's over, guys, pack up the bags. And then your family back home from personal experiences or from people that you talk to are always just like, you sure you want to do this? Feels like everything's crumbling around. And I'm like, and then the answer kind of always ends up being with gritted teeth. Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird because at least for me too, it's like, at least doing YouTube in particular, again, I don't want to go down the whole like romanticizing it, but I do feel more like myself doing YouTube than ever, in terms of like choosing this, being the career path with all the like warts and all, with all the chaos that can kind of ensue from it. It just feels like, oh, this is still me. It embraces kind of my a little bit of my ADD personality too. I can do a little bit of everything. I can send an email, then work on a thumbnail, then edit a little bit. I can, you know what I mean? It's like a lot of little things to kind of maintain, and I'm just drawn to it. I just know. It's like, okay, this is it, you know?
Yeah, and I feel like that kind of like obsession can be healthy too, because it can force you to focus and be single-minded. And also like not everyone's lucky enough to know what they want.
Yeah.
And that is a thing I was reminded of very recently when I was like struggling financially. I was struggling with like the job situation. Chris and I both work other jobs outside the channel as well.
So do I.
And
So
yeah,
you get it.
we're all very busy people. And I think I was telling my roommate, I was like, yeah, it's just like, sometimes I'm just like, this is so stressful. This is causing me so much stress, but I still want to do it. I don't know if it's healthy anymore. Like,
Yeah.
and my roommate was like, she was telling me, she was like, listen, I think whatever happens, at least you tried, and not everyone gets to know what they love. And I never thought about it like that.
Yeah.
Because I was just like, yeah, not everyone gets to do what they love, but I never even thought about like, not everyone knows what they love.
Yeah.
That
yeah.
is like a specific thing, right? Like for all of us, it's just like you watching Michelle Pfeiffer in Batman Returns, clocking it and being like that. Not everyone has that moment. And I took it for granted until like this past year going through shit. But it's like with Richard Dreyfuss and Melinda Dillon's character, you know, as like fucked up as it is that he like has his family runs away from him because they don't understand it. And she loses her kid, but with this crazy obsession, they find each other.
Yeah.
And it is that thing. Sometimes you lose people sometimes going through this, but you end up also finding people that share that.
There was just something that you said, Altaf, about also why was it this movie for me too? And just you touching on like, you know, no one really getting it and understanding it. And part of it was me being so vulnerable because I want to make films and I want to be an actor. And I was also kind of being a little bit woe is me because I was like, I'll never be or make a movie like this. And so I was like so sad. So I feel like everything just hit me. But then I was incredibly inspired after, and it completely changed me.
Your relationship to this movie is kind of when I was like a younger guy, realizing that I wanted to make movies or to be a part of them in some way. Spielberg inspired me, and I think like whenever I tell that to people, they always like kind of look at me weird just because they're like, Spielberg inspired you?
Well, because it's such like a kind of like a basic take.
But also he makes such huge movies that you're like, well, how are you going to amount to that? I'm like, that's the thing about Spielberg. I'm always like being like, how the fuck did he get this shot? Or how did he make this movie? Mm-hmm. But I think what inspires me about Spielberg and his movies, this one is a great example, is that for how big his movies are, they are so personal. And they feel so human.
Yeah, yeah. I remember, it's weird to bring this person up, but I remember Dave Grohl from Foo Fighters once said in a speech at one point, he said something along the lines of like, you should never be intimidated by your heroes. Like you should never look at someone and say like, ah, fuck, I wish I could do that. You should be like, oh, fuck, I'm going to do that. Like, you know, because you're just as human as they are, essentially.
I've had this crazy thought because now, so I kind of have divided my movie life into like two parts. I'm like before my reaction channel and then now, because I've had a lot of movies that have made a big impact on me before, which made me got more into movies. And then now this channel, because it means so much because I get to share it with people. But something that I never realized about Steven Spielberg is that he's been part of my life and all of our lives, but kind of like I never realized it. Because I grew up with Indiana Jones and especially The Last Crusade. Like I loved that movie so much, and I grew up with Jurassic Park. But I recently now watching Saving Private Ryan, Jaws. I just watched E.T. on my channel too. Like it's crazy like how different his whole catalog is.
Yeah.
But he is such an incredible storyteller. But I had picked up onto this because I just rewatched Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade because I went to Disneyland. And I was like, I am so lucky to have had him be part of my life as a storyteller, because I was like, I watched Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade with a different lens as an adult. And I was like, he is incredible with his shots and how he tells a story and his like emotional dynamic change. And in each scene that he does. And I think that's kind of why it seems so like, oh yeah, Steven Spielberg. But I'm like, no, like I think he is literally my favorite because of what he's done.
Yeah, and he makes it look so easy too. That's always like
Yeah.
the thing that's so cool. Is he's not like this big show off. Like he gets amazing shots, but he never feels like he's showing off when he does stuff.
true.
He just it seems like he's just telling the story authentically to what speaks to the story the most. And what would still wow the audience in a certain way. He wants to give that to us as, moviegoers, but he doesn't feel like, oh, look at me. He doesn't do like the 10th film by Steven Spielberg. You know what I mean? He's just, he just makes it feel so effortless. And I think it's easy to grab a hold of that and let that inspire you in a way.
Yeah, it's interesting because like he cares so much about, especially in this era of Spielberg, he thought a lot about just like how an audience is watching a movie.
Yeah.
And I think that's why his movie speaks to so many people, is that when you watch Close Encounters, it does kind of feel like you're witnessing a UFO.
Yes. Yeah.
It-
It feels
it-
like
it-
it's happening to you. You've like, I felt like I was Roy experiencing this whole thing.
The patience of it, the fear of it, the spectacle of it, it's all there.
Yeah, I mean, it even took me a second to like I said, I went into this movie super blind, so it took me a second to get a read on, like get a grasp of who the main character was too, because it starts off with kind of cutting around a lot between like it opens with like the government, going over and talking to that guy who witnessed it, and then it
Right.
cuts over to air traffic control, and seeing that weird thing in the radar, and then there's like 4 different people that it cuts back and forth between when it opens, and it took me a second to be like, okay, where are we going with this? I was fascinated, but I was like, what is this? You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
which-
I think what's interesting about it is that like it opens with 2 people speaking different languages trying to communicate with each other.
Yes.
immediately.
It cuts to the family and there's 3 different conversations in that living room with the family. Like they're all like they all can't really talk to each other. And it like really is, until that big mothership comes in, everyone goes quiet. And it's all those 5 notes. It is just like, it builds to a crescendo of 5 notes. It's like amazing.
Yeah.
I want to talk about my favorite shot in the movie because I think it's thematic, but like it's the kid opening the door to the orange light.
Okay, sure.
Oh,
Like,
yeah,
it's like the
great
cover of
shot.
the movie, isn't it? It's one of them.
It's one of the covers of like the movie. Well, the real poster of this movie is also brilliant. It's just this road to a starry sky, and it explains what the first encounter, second kind, and third kind is.
Yeah.
it's amazing. But the kid opening the door to the orange light, it's a big theme of this movie that I wrote in the talking points, Ames, and is the curiosity of a young kid versus the cynicism of an adult, and how by the end those 2 things kind of meld a little bit. But the kid,
His name's Barry.
yes, good. Barry,
Thank you.
Gotcha.
played
She
by
beat you to it, by the way. I just want to jump on that.
played by Carrie Guffey.
Carrie Guffey.
Yes, and he is like, he just has a great Spielberg face.
yeah.
I
I know what
think
you're saying.
Spielberg. I don't really get that, which I think is funny. But I think he's incredible at casting and working.
Well, that's the
with
thing. It's like I
kids.
don't, but I do at the same time. Like I know what you're.
So here's what
you're
I
getting
well
at.
no I'll explain myself a little bit. I think like in all of Spielberg's movies, whenever he has a kid actor, he always has a kid actor look at something in just awe, and you
Oh, yes.
like. And that face has just been a part of my life in such a big way with Jurassic Park, with E.T.
The reaction shot, the Spielberg reaction shot, essentially.
Yeah, and like I think this kid is like the perfect version of that because he has these like big eyes that are popping,
Yeah.
and he's like smiling, and you're like, you want to see the other shot. Like it's it's really great like casting. But getting to that specific shot, him opening the door, the orange light, the mom coming in to shut it. It is everything. Not only is it just beautiful, but it's also being like, I think Spielberg in an interview said, I've watched every interview about this movie, but like, I think Spielberg in an interview said he was just like, the point of that scene is kids will always open the door, and adults will always close it. And he said that
That's really
like,
interesting.
he said that what I hope to have with my movies and throughout my life is to always be the kid that opens the door. And it's like, but what's crazy about that though is that he has this like hopeful outlook on it, but then at the same time, Spielberg's exploring both sides
The
of that.
dread that comes with
Like
it. And,
curiosity can give you splendor, but then also can trap you and destroy you. The kid gets abducted. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Make no mistake, he straight up gets abducted by aliens.
I want to know what you guys think too, and if you guys have like a shot that really stands out to you in that way.
Sure.
Well, curiosity and wonder for me was a huge part of this movie and why I loved it. My favorite scene is when the UFO comes over the Roy's truck and he gets like touched by the light. But all the things they did, like with the magnets and stuff, I was like, I don't know. I just thought that was such a cool way to shoot it. And then that scene that you like was my second favorite.
The setup of it is so great, where there's a car behind him, he lets the car go, and then you see another headlights and he lets the car go, and then that one floats.
Yeah, that's exactly the shot I was gonna say was my favorite. As soon as I remember, I verbally said out loud, like, "Oh shit!" right when it happened. I also just like that the overall rules of how power kind of goes haywire. When the aliens coming in, it's like a good it's another kind of good sci-fi touch of like. Clearly, it's emotionally tapping into man's relationship with technology and the way otherworldly things can kind of, it's almost like a critique of where we've ascended as a species.
Yeah, not to spoil it for you, Ames, but it is interesting that Nope like explores like a lot of that too. Yeah, but I like how immediately he's like fucked up by it though. Like he's not only like visually like he's just sunburned, but like it just begins right away. Where he goes to the house and he's like,
guys, you got to see. He gets him out at like 4 a.m. Yeah, I know.
There's so many things going on in this movie. We've already discussed the big themes, but there's also this whole thing of just like even before the aliens show up, him and his wife are kind of at like this standstill in their relationship.
Yeah.
Yes.
From the beginning, that scene with the kid in the model trains. Like, again, it's like that feeling of like they can't really connect. It's like, you should go take them to see a movie. And then right when he's looking at to go see what movie we should go see Pinocchio, she's already focused on something else about the kid and everything. And he's like, Pinocchio, let's go see Pinocchio, right?
Yeah, and the kids don't even want to go, too.
And then when he forces her to come out and see the alien, they're both looking at opposite directions.
I didn't catch that. That's
like,
funny.
he's looking up and she's like, remember when we used to come here just to fool around or whatever? And they like, they can't. It's just like he's kind of already lost. It isn't the really aliens, but he's just already lost.
Yeah, the connection's lost, and then it's like even more lost because he's just now on this like other world, with all of his thoughts and where his mind is at, and she's trying to connect with him, and he's just like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah, I know. He basically experiences such a profound thing to him. Of course, that would be profound to anyone if they firsthand witness aliens and have just their world would be shaken. Of course, their relationship's going to be messed up, especially if it was already rocky.
So I'm the like now. I think this is a good transition. I am the single guy out of us three. Now I think so. I'm gonna ask a question that you guys can just be like, dude, fuck off. We're not answering it. But I do want to. I do want to throw it to you two. What's your relationship been like balancing your actual romantic relationship and also your like career goals?
Yeah, it's been complicated. I think like because it's gone from such like a for us, I think you and I both know it was like kind of really a hobby for us for a while, which we wanted it to turn into a career when we first started this. But we did it for like before our reaction videos started really picking up. We were doing videos for like 3 years every week, or something like that. Or maybe about like 2 years or so, somewhere
2 to 3 years, but we never missed a week. But we were, it was a very, very slow. Like it took us like a good year or two just to get to 1,000 subscribers. We were just, we made videos comfortably knowing no one is watching us. And so it just became kind of just a habit and part of our routine of, okay, got to shoot, got to edit, got to do this thing. We were just casually committed to it. And I think it was until recently when we started like, at least for me and, my girlfriend, like started questioning in terms of like, okay, well, why am I doing this? Like, what's the purpose of it? Because like the time put in is still, it's a sacrifice essentially, at least for me, speaking for myself, that this time that we're spending doing YouTube videos could be spent having a meaningful conversation or doing quality time or anything, right? Or taking care of the apartment better or, any of like the real world stuff. And then you even start questioning like outside of that, where he's like, wait a second, if I'm going through so much stress in my personal life, like what is it why am I doing this other thing?
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, and it's weird because, I love it. I love building a community and people watching us. It's like an amazing feeling when people leave us, great comments saying like, you guys are my comfort food every week. You know what I mean? That stuff's like, I love that.
And that's
stuff.
how Chris.
Sure.
That's, by the way, that's how Chris reads all of our comments.
Look, they said this.
Yeah.
But and it's also weird, like I remember you and I went to a library with my girlfriend once, and then a fan of ours walked right up and then just said like, "Hey, I just want to say I love your guys' show." This, and it's just weird. It's amazing. It's just weird.
Well, it was funny because like we're so not used to it, because he came up and he was like, "By the way, guys, just want to let you know this library, it's 4th of July, so the library is closing a little early. Also, love your guys' show." And I was like, "Oh, what are you talking about?" Like
both of us really what show?
Like my mind, I was like, I couldn't process that he's seen the channel. But
Ames, you want to jump in? Like, what are some of your thoughts?
Well, I definitely have to be like quite mindful about splitting my time, because I do this and then I also have my day job, and obviously have to like nourish my relationship. But I'm extremely lucky. My husband is like incredibly supportive and suggested I do reactions, because I was like, I've wanted to do YouTube for 10 years. I don't know what I want to do. And he's like, why don't you watch movies? I was like, what are you talking about? But I think even with acting and auditions, I get kind of tunnel vision. I get a call for an audition and I'm like, I drop everything. And
yeah.
I'll come home from I'll come home from my day job and I'll be like, I have an audition, like I have to prep. And then I just like come into my little studio and I just like into my hole, we call it. But I've just made shifts and been mindful. We do a lot of like, make sure we have coffee in the morning together with no tech, or like dinner together, no tech, and like a date night a week or whatever. Because we both have like tons of hobbies that keep us busy. But I think that's also something that also brings us together, because we're able to like share the things we like. So I'm just like really, I feel very grateful and very lucky. But again, I have to be extremely mindful, because I get like, I just want to do this. Like, I need to watch movies today, or like, I need to do my audition. And I have to just be mindful, because I'm very good at connecting also with my friends and my family, but I don't live in my hometown. So I don't go home.
Yeah.
I need to see more of my friends, even though I reach out to them a lot. I'm just like, oh man, I'm such a shit friend. But I'm usually there for people when they need it. But I'm like, I need to make more time to be with the people that really matter, because life is short. We never know how much time we're going to have. So yeah, it just makes me more mindful, actually.
100%. I mean, like, I definitely connect when you say you have to make the time to like not do any technology or have coffee, because like oftentimes, my girlfriend and I live together, and sometimes if I wake up, the first thing before even saying hi or wanting to, whatever, what do you want to do for breakfast, any of that, I'm like, hang on, let me check my phone. I gotta see how this video's doing. You know what I'm saying? Like the first thing I do sometimes when I fucking wake up, and I'm like, that's when I realize, like, okay, I need to chill. You know what I mean? Like I need to know that separation, because you have to like actively turn off. Otherwise, like you said, the default is just like, I got to do this thing. Like you said, I got to go to an audition. I got to do the,
you become Roy in this movie, throwing clay at a mountain.
A little bit sometimes. Yeah. Like all the time. Like nowadays, especially with my phone, like I get like anxiety spikes when I feel my phone go off, because I don't know if it's going to be what it's going to relate to, if it's like my dad reaching out to me, or if it's going to be YouTube related, or whatever it is, like now I'm like, okay, who needs me? What's happening?
All right, are my parents disappointed, or did we get copyright struck? I don't know.
Exactly. What is this going to be?
Oh, the doom of the copyright strike.
I know, that's a whole other rabbit hole to get into.
Yeah, exactly.
This movie reeks of someone who made it that didn't figure out a work-life balance. Like I feel like when I watch this movie, because of knowing especially the story behind, like Spielberg wanted to make this movie before he made Jaws, and they hadn't quite figured out this whole like family personal dynamic yet, but he wanted to make this movie for a while. And he was young, obviously, when he was making it, and it feels like someone who's like, all I know is my work, but now I have like a wife. How the fuck does that come into the equation? Like,
yeah, because obviously it's like it's weird. It's a weird feeling. You have to like make those active decisions, and there's always like a good sacrifice to be made, but sacrifices that you have to choose to make.
One thing I forgot to mention
Please.
that I think is incredible about this movie is that Steven Spielberg wrote and directed this, because I know that he uses books or whatever for a lot of his films or other people's ideas.
And he rarely has screenplay credit. Yeah.
So when it opened up, I was like, he wrote and directed this.
So it's like personal to him, you know.
Well,
Yeah.
it's funny, like he has like a lot of story by credits, and all his movies, like he works closely with the screenwriter when developing them. It's not like he just like, I like the script, and because all his movies feel personal in a way.
Yeah.
But this is like so close to home. It's also like, if you want to look at the behind the scenes, which I won't go through, he got a script from Paul Schrader. That was like the first Paul Schrader, the writer of Taxi Driver, who submitted the script. Spielberg hated it. And they had like a really tumultuous relationship. Surprisingly, it's fucking Paul Schrader. But like, he didn't like it. It went through like different writers. It went through so many different iterations. But like Spielberg did have like a specific vision for it that he ended up getting the writing credit. Now, it's one of those things where I'm like, I don't know how much of it was him with the pencil and paper, like, you know what I mean? Or if he was like so heavily involved that he ended up getting the screenplay credit. But I know this movie is way more personal to him than maybe his others in a way. Especially like at least his genre pieces.
Yeah, it didn't seem to be in the market to make the audience like cozy the way his usual movies do, like to appeal to as many people as possible. I'm not saying that's a bad thing that Spielberg does, but he does make very cozy movies. You know, he's known for being very,
even though Jaws is like extremely stressful, but it is like,
but they blow up the shark's head at the end and it's victorious. You know what I'm saying? It's cozy at the end. You know.
So I think
Cozy.
Yeah, but kind of, right? Wouldn't you say that? Like,
yeah, I was like, I don't think
totally...
Jaws is like a cozy movie, but I get you. I think what you're trying to get at, if I'm not wrong, is like it is. A lot of his movies are emotionally satisfying.
Exactly,
they're cathartic in a way.
Emotionally cozy.
Cozy.
I'm gonna die on that hill. I'm gonna use that word.
But yeah, I something I like about this movie in terms of just like these people who, after they've encountered the aliens or they know that there's some other life force and they need to figure it out. My favorite part is just like watching people who are good at their jobs do their jobs in movies. It's like my favorite thing in any movie. But when the scientists and researchers realize, or like Bob Balaban's character realizes, like, these are longitudes. And one of my favorite underrated moments in this movie is them being like, who has a map? There's a globe in that room. They untouch that globe. They roll it to the hallway.
He's like, that's like $2,000 or whatever. And they're like, who cares? Like,
but even that, Ames, I related to that feeling that you had watching this movie, where I remember you said for your Patreon, you immediately wrote this whole thing about it because you just felt like there was like this lightning bolt of inspiration. Yeah. And I feel like that moment captures that a little bit. Like, you and I have, actually, I come to you a lot with these ideas that I get super excited about, that I feel like we have to do immediately. And you're the reason our partnership works is that, like, you're usually like, let's take 5 steps back.
I'm just, okay, how are we going to do this thing? How much money is that going to cost? Where are we going to get that?
But that energy of them just grabbing the globe and the guy being like, that's an expensive globe, being like, okay, let's just roll it. Let's go. Let's figure it out. It's like that energy of when you feel inspired.
Well, and you also see them go a little crazy in their own way too. And of course, like anyone would, but you see how it affects, kind of everyone when they're looking into this.
But what I love about that is I love the math aspect of it. I suck at math.
Same.
But I love physics, and I love how part of the communication was like based on like music and math, and like figuring it out was that, because I really feel like if we did encounter aliens, like math would be a huge component.
Like just the idea of how they would hear it too, like aliens hearing things, like absorbing frequencies in the air. Their physics on their planet and gravity and whatever the components that make their atmosphere will be completely different than ours, I imagine. So sound will be different.
I want to get to the final act basically, but what's the mountain called? Is it called the Devil's Mountain? Like, what's the
called the Devil's? It's called Devil's Tower.
Devil's Tower.
That's what it is.
I've actually been there. I went there last year.
Oh, no way. That's cool. Before you saw the movie?
Before I saw the movie.
She saw the movie a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. So last August, I did a road trip from Chicago back to Canada, and I actually saw Mount Rushmore and stuff. But I had heard about this movie, and we were driving through through Wyoming, and I was like, oh my God, we have to go here because we're going into Yellowstone. And there's a KOA there, a Campground of America, and they actually play the movie at nighttime in the summer, like in front of Devil's Tower. But we didn't. I mean, it worked out, but we got there too late. But it's a pretty, like, remarkable piece of Earth, and I think it's actually quite special that I've seen it in real life, because it's like my face literally seeing it, because we got there at nighttime is pitch black, and then in the morning I like got out of my car and I was like, oh my God. But I think that was the one thing in the movie that was like kind of spoiled for me, because I kind of like knew that it was a huge thing in the movie. So it was still cool how it like unraveled in the story, but I was kind of like, oh, that was like would have been even better if I didn't know. But it was cool to visit. I highly recommend it.
And it's also been teased throughout the past 2 hours. They've been drawing it, like they've been seeing it. And I love that just single shot after Roy loses his whole family. He has gone insane, builds that like the mountain in his like house.
Yeah.
And he's like now on a phone call because he's given up. He's like, I don't even know what it is. I'm going to get back on a call with my wife and try to meld things. And right when he's trying to like fix things with his wife, he sees the same thing on the TV. And it's such a great, like, he's about to get back with his family, and then he's like, fuck this, let's go.
I know, dude. I know. I remember once all that started kicking in, once he's like driving and,
Oh, God.
I remember thinking, like, I thought to myself, like, this is insane. Like, this is like way more uncomfortable than I expected it to be.
Well, especially the way the government's like hiding it all. Like, the way they like...
it gets like very Truman Showy.
The way they're masking... Exactly. The way they're masking the trucks to make it look like Piggly Wiggly and Baskin Robbins.
All the dead animals.
Well, they weren't dead. I think they were just knocked down.
Well, yeah, but they presented them as dead. Yeah, that's
right.
Yeah.
But I think that I actually didn't care that he was trying to get back to his family, because I was like, look at the TV. I was like yelling. I was like, look at the TV. Because I was so with him, because I just felt so much empathy for him and like what he was going through.
Well, and they also build it up well because they establish that the government is in on all of it too. Mm-hmm. So when you see Richard Dreyfuss like starting to go crazy and no one believes him, you empathize with him, because you're like, no, he's on the right track. There is something going on, and he's kind of the only one aware of it, along with the mom.
I honestly think this is like some of the most insane final 15 minutes on like in a sci-fi movie. Like, it is so patient. I feel like there's moments where I'm just not breathing. Like when the mothership arrives, and Ames, I want to get your thoughts on like when you first watched it, what was it like for you? Because when the mothership arrives, and it's just being like, all right, let's play the 5 tones. Let's hear what they say. I mean, I just couldn't, like, I didn't move.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What was your experience like watching that scene for the first time?
I think that I was just in the moment there with them, and there was so much stillness. Like, it was as if I was like seeing a UFO come down, and the way they had the lights with the 5 tones and stuff, and how that was all shot, I was just like, this is incredible. And I also didn't know how it was all going to unfold, because there's also a bit of suspense there, because you don't actually know like what type of encounter it's going to be.
Yeah, like what's going to happen next. Like, kind of the elephant in the room is this thing about to start opening fire and obliterating all of us. So there's like, you do feel that at least, like, is this going to be friendly? What's going to happen here?
Like, there's so much mystery, right? Like, you're
100%.
just like, and throughout the whole movie, there's a lot of curiosity and wonder, but it's also like the film is so mysterious, because you don't actually get to see this until what the aliens are until the end.
Yeah. I think as well too, like I felt the same thing, where like I also just love gauging everyone's reactions, the way everyone freezes, and how Richard Dreyfuss has been hiding from them, and then he just kind of walks in with everyone, and then no one cares too, and he walks in. He's like, at that moment, all of humanity is kind of unified, like all the bullshit of like laws and
protocol.
Protocol. Everyone's just seeing something that's beyond all of our understanding, and we're just kind of all together for it.
That's why I think that,
which is so perfect in that moment, right? Because it's like,
100%.
that is exactly what would most likely happen.
Well,
because you're just so fixated on this thing.
I think in the synopsis, that's why I mentioned, like, we play this game of telephone with each other through our whole, like, all of human race does this, where we say one thing, it gets interpreted some way, the media expresses it in a different way, and that's how we're informed, and we all have our different opinions on it, right? And I'm like, what would it really take for all of us to just come...
Just shut the fuck up.
Shut the fuck up for a second. And it would take some...
An alien, like an evolution. Just kidding.
Yeah.
Well, it would take some...
what's the word? Can't think of.
It would take something truly extraordinary. It would take something like that. For all of us to shut the fuck up for a second.
Yeah, and there's just so much tension too, especially when they have like the guy with the keyboard and the musical experts trying to interpret it as it goes. Like, there's so much tension as soon as he plays those notes, and you're kind of like, okay, what's gonna happen? Every time it happened, they played something back, and then it gradually turned more and more into like a little rave. As the
I
light
know.
started flashing. And
They're like,
Yes.
my favorite interaction was when they were like, what are they even saying? It's like they're teaching us basic tonal vocabulary, and that one guy is just like, it's the first day of school, fellas.
Yeah.
It's just like, this is like, we shouldn't be able to understand yet. We're not entitled to that yet. We are learning right now.
Yeah, they're teaching us. We're listening.
And it's such a, like, for how dark this movie is, it's such an optimistic view on humanity that we would all just shut the fuck up and be willing to learn.
Yeah, and it's like, I remember one thing that Spielberg said too is like a lot of, or at least people have interpreted that, that it's technology as well that encourages that relationship. You know, it's music, but it's also like we have the means to do it, you know, with the big, you know, technological aspect.
What's a blend of it?
Exactly. That's what it is. It's a blend.
What's cool about that 5-tone motif and that whole with the tension and the suspense and everything that's going on is it encapsulates the film's theme of like discovery and communication and also like connection, which you see with everybody watching it come down and kind of what you're touching on. And I think it's such a beautiful like first step maybe in like peaceful exchange, not just with like extraterrestrial life, but like maybe like with each other on like a deeper side.
Yeah, I love how like all of them are just like waiting and listening. I mean, they're also, I mean, obviously you can't really do anything else in that moment.
They're all frozen with fear probably too in their own way. It's like probably wonder and fear at the same time.
Yeah.
You know.
And it's that like not skipping ahead, but like it's that final thing that the French guy does, the Francis Truffaut.
The sign language.
He does a sign language and he just smiles and the alien does it back.
Yeah, it's like a weird gesture of like we're cool, man. That's kind of what it was.
It's like he's the alien smiling.
I know. I think it is just like this moment of like we got each other, we understand each other. It's fine.
Yeah.
How much of it you don't understand too? Like I love how like at least the first time I watched this movie, and still to this day, I'm like, what are they saying? Like, what does this music, what are they saying to each other? And I mean, it's fun to break down, but also I love the fact that like, we kind of just don't know.
Yeah.
And that's okay. What we do know is that we're connected. And
exactly. It's like a huge irony if people try to spend a bunch of time breaking down, like when they played this motif, that must mean, and like, it's like the whole, it goes against the whole point of the movie is that like, it's okay to not know and we can just like, own that, you know what I mean?
Okay,
I agree.
So final move, let's talk about it. They slap on a suit on Roy Neary, and he's like, "You're going in, buddy." And he's like, and the aliens are like, "Come with us."
Yeah, they select him basically because there's a whole row of them. The aliens are like, "You."
I wonder if all those other guys were just like, "Really, man? What the fuck? This random dude that
just now joined us."
Well, what I actually loved is doesn't the French guy doesn't he say he's jealous?
I think so.
I envy you.
I envy you. Yeah, because I thought that was so moving because it's like he's like this math guy or whatever, and he's watching this go down, and I'm like, he sees that Roy has been like touched or like has this connection.
It's so
because I thought he was gonna go with them too, but like maybe he just didn't have it because he wasn't chosen or something. But I just loved that because he also just like watched him go. And
I'm glad you brought that up. I actually like, you know, that is a moment that stood out to me, but I forgot about it. But bringing that up, yeah, it kind of makes you think a little bit about what's that moment trying to say. You know, you could also look at it as, we talk about this all the time, like, and Ames, I'm sure you relate, like, even though our jobs is like, we get to watch movies and talk about movies for a living, sometimes you can't look at movies in the same way. Just because it has kind of become a little bit more work to us. We try to make sure, like, through both of our channels to kind of express that in the best way. But I think you and I, Chris, were talking about last night how you were like, yeah, movies have kind of become like more of a nice dude thing for me. And outside of that, I still like it, but I try to separate those two lives.
Yeah, 100%. You know, and I mean that in the best way possible. Like, I get all my movie fandom out of my system through the channel and stuff. And then outside, I like to kind of, you know, that's when I like to play video games or listen to music or consume other types of art to kind of still feel like kind of, you know, well-rounded a little bit.
And I think that what that moment is touching on, if we want to loop it back to this like constant thread of creativity and art and making art, is that sometimes you can watch someone who just like enjoys something or takes something in a deeply emotional way, in a way that you maybe couldn't just because you're so deep in the weeds.
Yeah.
So like that French guy, seeing him, like, I envy you, is kind of just like it was, you could see him being like, oh, this is why we're doing this.
It's like his life's work kind of amounting to that. It's like it's the same energy as like, Alan Grant, looking at seeing his dinosaurs in action,
They do move in herds.
They do move in
It's
herds,
that-
exactly, yeah.
And it's like, you can, on all of Spielberg's movies, it's about like the experience. So many of his movies are about what happens when you come close to the sublime.
Yeah.
Like, what's that experience like?
Sure.
Yeah, but how do you guys feel in general about Roy being like, Roy going, and the movie ending with Roy going with the aliens?
Yeah.
He lost his family. Like, he's just like,
Yeah, he just did. Well, he just ditched Earth.
and
He did ditch Earth.
and Ames, I want to start with you because I remember you were saying that you're like, when I was mentioning how Spielberg said he wouldn't end that movie with Roy going away with the aliens and leaving his kids, you disagreed, and you do believe, which I do too, but I want to hear from you. Why do you so strongly believe that this is the right ending?
I think I actually said in my reaction, I was like, if that was my dad, I was like in tears. If that was my dad, I would be so mad at him, but then I would be so incredibly proud of him, because I think it would be a very hard thing to do, because he's going on this adventure and truly would never be the same. And then I was like, but the other people came back that had been abducted, so maybe he would come back too.
Maybe
so I had
100
this
years
like
from now, but still.
yeah, I had this like, okay, maybe he's gonna go and he'll come back, because other people came back, like Barry came back, the pilots came back. So I had a peaceful resolve and a hope, actually. I had more hope, I think.
Yeah, like you said, he never would have been the same either way. Like, the alternative of him staying is like, yeah, let's say he stayed with his family. He would have driven them away. He would have gone mad, like, completely.
He had to go.
Yeah, like, he would have just thought about it again and again, would have reinterpreted things differently. Like, he would not have healed, I don't think, at least.
I also think with the ending, it works because it's like this universal feeling that like something else is out there. And I think it's like a huge reflection on human nature and how that affects us. And we're constantly seeking to like understand the world, and there's like all these mysteries that are just like beyond us and beyond our grasp. And like, people can say divine or sublime, you've used that word, but I feel like that's why it resonates so much with us, and leaving it partially unexplained is, I think, what makes it even better.
And also, even just down to like when the credits are rolling, how you're still watching it too. The credits were like on the side. They wanted you to look at it, watch it go, essentially.
Yeah.
Yes. And it's kind of a callback to the rest of the movie, because you see the shots of the sky and like you see the little star
Yeah.
UFO going, right? So you're still like entranced by it at the end, and you're left wondering. And
Yeah, they like wanted you to
incredible
stick with
feeling.
it. It didn't work. Like, no, we're not leaving you here. You're gonna watch it go. You're still gonna think about it. Like, the movie's not done with you.
I used to live in Maine, and when I was a kid, and in
wow.
Maine they had like, I grew up with like the night having like there being a starry night sky, and I miss looking at stars. I think this movie really made me miss like the feeling of looking at stars.
It's the most LA problem we could have. I know, right? Stars, man. I miss stars.
Even in
got to get into nature, man. It's true. Yeah. It's something that I miss. I get to see some stars here more living in like British Columbia, but it's not the same from when I used to look out my window every night and I would wish upon a star, because it was just didn't have the light or anything. You could actually see the sky.
Yeah, you just feel connected, essentially. You just feel like, in a good way, like you it brings you down out of your ego a little bit. At least for me, whenever I experience those things, or I see animals and nature.
Dude, I mean, that's like the third act of this movie, right?
Totally.
It's bringing them all down to something that's so primal in a way.
Yeah.
Okay. Ames, it's time to ask you the final question. This is it. This is what it's all been building up towards.
That's what everyone's waiting for listening to this. They're like, come on, we got to get to the...
What's your address? No, I'm just kidding. How did Close Encounters of the Third Kind change you?
Oh, man. This might be fragmented, but I'm just going to go off feelings.
Please.
Yeah, please.
Because I was in such a vulnerable space watching this, and we've touched on that a lot, I felt like it was kind of like an emotional rebirth for myself. And I really kind of saw myself in Roy. I think movies like transform us. And I think, like I said earlier, they strike a chord with us at these like pivotal moments in our lives. And this movie totally did that for me. But it also, this movie is like a symbol of curiosity for me, which I think is so important to like never lose, not just in like a sci-fi alien movie, but it ignited me with this like powerful surge of like inspiration. And I think what's really important about some of Spielberg's movies is they embolden you. And I feel like movies like this make my heart pump. They make me, they're the reason why I watch movies and I love them so
you
much.
feel alive, essentially.
Sorry, that was deep.
I mean, that's this podcast, so it's totally fine.
Yeah, get deep, please.
You're on brand.
Feels.
I think I think that's the reason why I love Spielberg and what he's done for like movies is that like Chris and I say this a lot whenever we watch a movie that blows our fucking mind is humans made this. Like it's
We say that a lot. Yeah, humans made that. They built that.
and it's reminding yourself of like you watch a movie like this and you're like, oh, this is what we're capable of.
Yeah, well, especially a movie that deals with that very thing you're talking about, just like what everything amounts to, what we, where we ascend as a species, like the altitude that we reach technologically, like the goalpost always shifts, if that makes any sense, of like knowledge. Like we always think we could know more. There's always like a little extra thing we got to push to know more of.
Thank you so much, Ames, for being on this show. We really, really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much for reaching out originally to us.
Yeah.
You guys rock. Thanks so much for having me. I didn't get to say, my alien theory, though.
Oh, shoot.
Alien theory.
Great way to end it. Please give us your alien theory. Can I tell you? Yes,
I
please.
stole this from someone near and dear to me, but
okay.
I find it very fascinating that we have all these kind of like same stories of like the typical alien with like the big head, the eyes, whatever. They kind of look like us. And I kind of saw that in this movie.
Yeah.
But I'm like, because they never seem to hurt us, right? At least these ones that we've seen. So what if they're us from the future and they come back and they check on us? And that's why they're peaceful. Anyways, it's a crazy conspiracy, but I find it to be very fascinating because the way we change in all the space travel. So that's why our legs get elongated and our heads get bigger. I just thought it was a really cool theory that I had recently heard.
Through thousands and thousands of years of evolution, we have become different life forms. And we are coming back to save ourselves.
Oh yeah, and in space, time it could be interpreted differently too. Like if we're seeing them in the 50s.
Well, that's
fascinating.
That's what I like about.
I gotta think about that. I gotta digest that. That's really interesting.
Yeah, I didn't really explain it very well,
but it's
kind of like the idea.
But immediately it just opens up a rabbit hole in my head of like, wait, how long does it take for humans to evolve? Like how we're going from Homo sapiens, like going from Neanderthals to this.
That's why I like Arrival so much because the premise of Arrival is literally like we're gonna need your help in like 1,000 years, so we're here to help you first.
Yeah, like the aliens experience time differently, and therefore it affects our experience of time too.
Yeah, and then the movie plays with time in that way, like her learning the language and informing that later. Yeah. It's so fascinating. Wow, great theory to end this show on. Thank you so much, Ames, for joining us. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you to our patrons for supporting us again and again. And last but not least, stay nice, dudes.